Begin by settling in. In the context of what we talked about last week, with going into a less differentiated fundamental consciousness, I want you to close your eyes, take a breath, and consider, in the form of a silent contemplation, what's the minimum amount of stuff that you can carry right now? What's the simplest experience you can have sitting here right now? What genes can you take off? What worries can you take down, and how can you replace them with just the sensory contact arising in each and every micro moment of experience? And the mind will continue making mental structures from these contacts. We don't have to do anything with them, just go back to our senses. Settle into our body, into our breath. Not do or worry about anything in particular. How big of a space can awareness unfurl and expand to right now? In our body, our mind, inside our head, inside our torso. How much space can we feel? How big is the room that we're in? Can we take up all of the space? How big is the city that we're in? I'm not asking you to imagine a city, just to relax so deeply. The awareness just naturally unfurls a little bit. You relax so much that you feel even the wall behind you in your mind. Get a little sense of it without leaving your body. From here, you can find your heart, center of your chest, center of your being. Doesn't have to be perfect. See if you can find, generate your highest intention. Be an intention for awakening, be an intention to relieve all suffering, be an intention for complete enlightenment. See how from the heart that intention can touch every fiber of your body. See how much of you would like to collaborate on this intention. We're coming into this session together. And we can also, with eyes open, see the rest of our little Sangha here. See if there's a resonance with the intention. Others we can see on the screen. Maybe we don't have to even think about the intention anymore. Just a trust that our highest intentions are coming together, resonating, creating a supportive field for all of us together. Today we're going to cover two very important topics. One has to do with something so foundational to our existence that I termed it the grease that keeps our metal gears running. And the other deals with the actual metal gears that I'm calling coordinators, which are somewhat similar to what Shuladasa at the time would refer to as subminds. The reason that I'm calling them coordinators is that from the perspective of the act of coordination, we get all sorts of very intuitive insight for free about what it is that they do, about the organizing principles of their operation. And so, in the context of the puzzle that we spoke of last time, every time we have a need that manifests as an urge in the world, it requires an act of coordination between a few of our different subsystems of body and mind. It could be the whole body and how to mobilize it. It can be perception, how to integrate all of our senses into some coherent picture. It can be a social stance, it can be emotions, it can be planning, it can be even this basic act of simulating the world and then simulating an activity in it, which again, in terms of coordination, with each act of the simulation requires an integration and operation of all of this other subsystems that I just mentioned, the sensory perception, the mobilization of the body. And in a way that allows the brain to be very efficient, rather than inventing from scratch every piece of movement, we sort of remember the shape of that movement. So if I'm speaking a language and I have to do this with my mouth and I have to do this with my throat and I have to do the process that creates the relevant words based on the idea in my brain, there's a bit of a shape of this. Imagine like a network that lights up running inside of my body and mind. And then the quintessential shape of this network being the coordinator. We're also speaking about the principal component of every model, of every representation that we have in mind. And in some sense, the coordinator is the thing that ties together a few of those principal components, right? Sort of like what I did just now. This is a principal component of speaking. Something does this. This is a principal component of throat, right? It contracts and expands. And when it ties them together, the next time the stimulus from reality comes in and begins lighting up the relevant acts of activity, the thing that we know in the past has served us in terms of meeting the need, the coordinator entity can immediately light up and serve as a way to organize all of the different pieces more efficiently so that they don't have to speak to one another directly. If the throat had to speak with the mouth and that had to speak with and the voice generating routine in the brain and the thing that words it and the syntax, it would be a network that's too cumbersome. If it has to speak with just one entity, that's the coordinator could just tell it, now do this. As it feeds it the pattern that comes from the wording part of the brain. And so we have this hierarchical network of coordinators, each with its own function, right? So there's the speaking function, and then there's the talking function, right? Speaking as in just making the sounds and the words, but then there's the talking function, which is aligned with our goals function, which is aligned with our identity function. Every layer is collaboration and an integration of more and more and more coordinators. I want to stop here for a second and get a sense if this makes sense. If you have an intuitive idea of how this comes to be, like this, sometimes I like imagining an octopus, like a giant brain and a few tentacles, and each tentacle is connected to one subsystem and it orchestrates them all together into making a you in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yes. I like the idea. I don't know. I play the guitar,
Hmm?
and I always thought of it this way that at first you learn to play a single note, and then you learn to play a chord, and then you learn to play like a series of chords that harmonizes, and then you just think, oh, I'm gonna play this song, and like you first you press the little buttons, and then you get a bigger button that presses all the little buttons at once.
Perfect. That's a great analogy. So before we explore coordinators more, I now want to make the shift to gratitude. And we mentioned that when we let go, when we go deep into emptiness, when we dissolve all of our existing mental models and acts of coordination, gratitude is something that arises naturally from the ground of being. Even as we come into contact with just the undifferentiated bits of fundamental consciousness, they tend to manifest into gratituding mental constructs. Meaning, if I don't have any assumption about the world, if someone throws me into an island and I'm not exposed to culture and I don't have to construct very much of anything, the natural thing coming out of me, as long as I don't have all sorts of hidden genes in my mind, all sorts of trauma that directs my experience, it will be touched by gratitude and compassion and love and kindness, all of the Brahma Viharas that the Buddhists like talking about. And so, if we, as a practice, a type of practice that's described in this chapter, continually give gratitude to our coordinators, to anything that comes up in our mind, to any aspect of our lives, first and foremost, even as those mental constructs are constructed and active, right? We're not differentiated. They're at least more aligned with what would naturally come up from fundamental consciousness. Meaning, if the structures of our mind are built not on gratitude, but on harsh criticism and anger and shame and invalidation, we're going to have a much harder time, first of all, letting go, letting them relax and release. And second, create gratitude to begin with. Because in some sense, even as we're not differentiated, even as we have not gone deep into this path of emptiness, the more that our structures are shaped like fundamental consciousness, like the natural flows stemming from it, the more we'll have an easy time generating gratitude. So it becomes a self perpetuating cycle where gratitude begets gratitude. It's a virtuous cycle. And the deeper we go into the virtuous cycle, the more we can, in some sense, channel fundamental consciousness naturally without having to dissolve, which then also makes it easier to fully dissolve into fundamental consciousness. And the reason why it's easier, or a way to consider why it's easier for the solution into fundamental consciousness using gratitude, is that I think for all of us, it's very easy to see how, if we have a lot of activity in our lives, we're sort of going through our habits, the things that we think are expected of us, the way that we're supposed to be. As soon as someone that we care about, even externally, gives us praise or gratitude, or shows us in a loving and caring way that they appreciate what we do, we immediately get a positive signal, positive feedback that allows us to rely on what that implies for our connection. So if I come back home every evening and my wife makes me dinner, and I give her gratitude, she's much more likely to do it joyously the next day. Versus if I never say anything and I just eat in silence and give her a cold stare, right? I'm exaggerating, right? The different ends of the spectrum, just to give you an insight about how this might be. And so consider that fundamentally, giving gratitude to any coordinator, to any mental structure in our mind, is a way, and generally from a wider perspective than any just one coordinator, to give a signal to our system for what is good, for what it is that we consider to be valuable and desirable. And in an environment of mind with many different coordinators all trying to pull towards their solution, competing for how to answer the need. If you recall, last time we spoke about how winning this bidding war is what allows a coordinator to get the energy from the information flow coming from fundamental consciousness. If we give them the thumbs up, the signal of gratitude, they're much less likely to have to rely on the types of strategies that push away other coordinators, that make it so the general atmosphere of mind is that of a constant tense struggle. Each coordinator has a much easier time understanding what it is that's required of him, what it is that's of service to the greater mind. And every time we give gratitude to a coordination act, to a coordinator, it also has a much easier time identifying what is the core need. The entire system can see what is the purpose of the coordinator versus all of the craft that builds up alongside it, just because of many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the term mission creep. If you have, if you, so if you have an organization that's created to serve some purpose, let's say a government or a hospital or a nonprofit, originally it has a very simple mission, or a very neatly defined mission. Let's create a government so we can better organize how we get taxes and build roads. But then, as that institution grows and persists in time, it slowly starts spreading its tentacles into more and more things. Things have a tendency, and I speak about this in a chapter in the next section, um, about forms. Things have a tendency to want to increase the purview of their operation. And it's for much the same reason. The bigger that I am, the more tentacles I send out, the more energy flows I can take in for myself. there's no gratitude in mind, if there's no, oh, this is the thing that we want you to do, this is the thing that we all are smiling towards you when you're doing, this is just going to continue happening because no participant in the society of mind knows exactly what the government is for. Versus if it continually gets the signal of, oh, thank you for building roads, thank you for taking care of healthcare, right? And this is also in a position of invalidating it. If we invalidate the aspect of this government, I'm going to continue using this metaphor, that we don't like, then there's a tendency, and we won't go into this now, for the thing to defend itself. And then invalidating something tends to make it just much harder. Right? No, we've always needed government to make sure people use seatbelts. Right? It's like the continuous mission creep, an increasing of the size of the thing versus making sure that it's only giving the service that it was created for, that it's useful for, or even dissolving all the way when it's not needed anymore. And consider that the bigger the mission creep is of every coordinator, the harder it is to let go of genes because we're wearing genes upon genes upon genes, like it's like more layers and layers and layers of the straitjacket that we constantly wearing, and through this path we're learning to dissolve and let go of. Hmm. So this is a summary for today. I feel like I missed about 80% of the content of the chapter. It's a hard one to just describe from scratch. There are many building blocks that I don't think I gave great service of in this exploration. But let's jump into the discussion and see if we can fill the holes. Really think this one is an important one because when we start seeing every arising phenomena in some sense as a micro entity, aside from helping us let go of an idea of a grand self that's controlling everything, and of course also seeing the grand self as an act of coordination, it starts giving us this very precious insight into everything that's happening as a society of mind, as a group of entities trying their best to make a you, to make an experience. That opens up a whole suite of wonderful tools to be used. So take it away. You're all thinking deeply about this. Yeah, go ahead.
I like this aspect of the gratitude. Um, just to expand on that, maybe just to try to make it more practical, because to many people it's very hard to get to the point of the gratitude itself as a concept. And obviously, I mean, similar to the internal family system, yes, that talks about that. Um, it's important to understand that each part within the system has a positive intention, yes, similar to that. And if we can appreciate that, that's important. But in a practical sense, I think it's important to understand when we go to day in an activities that we are doing and try to understand why each part, what's the specific need, yes,
Mhm.
that each part of subsystem has. And what we found ultimately is that we realize that different parts within us have different kind of needs that push and pull to different directions. And once we utilize the gratitude, the positive intention, but then we going to a higher level to try to combine these needs to a higher level, yes,
Mhm.
to coordinate all of these things from a place of, you can call it love and compassion and unity. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that it would be important to go and break down the needs, the specific needs, and try to, in a practical sense, to see how we can grow that higher level meta unity, if you may say so,
Hmm.
that everybody ultimately gonna reduce their anxiety, reduce their, and they more collaborate in a sense that they're working in harmony in a
Hmm.
better way. Um, so ultimately, like you said, to reduce entropy and ultimately to create greater harmony and ease in operation. I'm just kind of like adding up to something that you said.
Yeah, yeah, this definitely aligns with the conceptions of IFS and the way that Chulasa speaks about subminds, in the sense of gratitude helping to identify the core positive motif in any act of coordination. And the more we go down the road, the more we also see, this is a very dharmic understanding, that every act of coordination that was not able to fulfill its purpose, that was not able to be expressed in a space of awareness, will start to be defiled, using defiled in the sense of the defilements, and start trying to push the other participants of mind in a way that's more zero sum, that's more aggressive, that's more invalidating. So, this harmony that you're mentioning directly translates into a state of mind where all participants respond with gratitude to whatever comes up, even if it's a no, thank you, right? We see the service that you're trying to provide, and thank you. It's not necessary right now.
I have a question. Uh, what do you think that it's not? Why do you think this isn't a naturally built process? Uh, you need to learn to give it. Um, you need to learn to not push away. You need to learn to be patient. Why do you think this isn't a natural thing? If it's so effective.
Hmm. So my cheeky answer is we are at nature. Here we are doing it. My slightly less cheeky answer is the causes and conditions characterizing samsara. And there's a whole deep dive later on in the book about samsara and how it's created and how it's perpetuated. The essence of which is because of those starting conditions, so to speak, there's a way that it's um, natural, from a certain perspective, for the mind to, rather than having a virtuous cycle, having a vicious cycle, so that every movement away from those fundamental qualities of fundamental consciousness creates the conditions that then move it even farther away. Meaning there's more non-zero sum, more zero sumness, more aggression, more invalidation. And of course we can have that as a that insight from seeing what happens in the world, right? Like someone makes you upset and you get a little angry and you're like, okay, I'll punch them and then that will solve it. But we don't consider that they will also punch us back or maybe then stab us or bomb our house and nation and so on, right? Like the proliferation of the zero sum aggressive motif. And in a sense, this also is a reflection of how this path is developmental, in the sense that as we learn to take a greater perspective, even just in the sense of not just wanting to punch a person, but also simulating in our mind that if I punch them, maybe I'm not, even if I'm stronger in the moment, maybe tomorrow they'll come and kill my entire family, that I at least stop doing the aggressive thing. And then again, from the same increased perspective that I can take and utilize for my life, naturally, I'm inclined to do things that are more non zero sum. It is just by creating the conditions for a spacious enough space of awareness that gratitude will arise. even without the fundamental connect, even without, let's say, a high bandwidth connection to fundamental consciousness, that is the nature of the universe to go towards it. Because strategies that embed gratitude in them are of higher fitness, to use evolutionary terms. People who internally and externally between one another enact those types of strategies win in competition between different people, between different nations. It's just a better strategy. So again, the line between natural and not natural, right? It depends on the perspective. But we can say that in the same way that fundamental consciousness, gratitude arises from it without needing to make any effort, that same motif characterizes all of this universe. And that's because loving strategies win, at least in the long term. This also lets me speak about one reason that I like this coordinator metaphor, because we can then speak about all sorts of wisdoms coming from evolutionary psychology and also game theory. So we have in evolutionary thinking what's called an evolutionary stable strategy. That's a way that in a society where everyone plays the love and trust game, if there's not enough something that we can call suspicion, if we don't verify claims that are made to us, then in the short term, someone who defects from the game of love and compassion, love and gratitude, love and trust, can manipulate others and extract value from them. Right? If I come to you and say, if the thing that we're used to is that I give you something and you pay me at some future date, right? Then everyone almost always pays. 99% of people pay. You can live an entire life without running into the person that doesn't pay. In a society like that, the defector, the one that doesn't pay, can just take stuff from everyone and then run off to the next tribe over, right? And start again. And so we can use those tools to see how to treat ourselves and the strategies that we use, again, both internally and externally, through this perspective, and slowly move towards a place where we have, in a sense, just enough suspicion, just enough desire to verify, or just enough of the systems of society that have this sort of thing baked into them without friction. Consider, for example, blockchain technology, where we can send something to someone and automatically, in what can be called an atomic transaction, speaking from trading terms, you get the thing. So there's no chance of defection. And so this also allows us to go into a whole exploration of the way that technology helps us bake trust and love into the basic assumptions and mechanisms of our lives. But I'm going to put that down. It's just like a taste of what sort of exploration is possible when we start using this coordinator language.
Yeah, I think when I think about it, like the events that I find myself as compassionate to others, it's always, well, usually when I disassociate or like don't try to put myself in their shoes or don't uh, see them as actual human beings, but whatever. Um, so it's mostly me being out of touch, and being out of touch is really easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's also a thing.
another way that this is natural is that ultimately compassion and kindness don't arise out of some moral sense of duty. Like I have to be compassionate with the person. It is essentially a better strategy even for the most selfish assumptions, even for self-preservation, for your own process of being how you want to be in the world. And it's an understanding that gets cultivated as you trend towards those movements. So in this example that you're giving, sometimes you feel disassociated from a person. This dissociation, and there's always to use the terms that we've been using. Dissociation is a type of genes. It's a type of um, act of coordination that probably, I don't want to describe you, but I don't know what is happening for you. I don't want to presume anything. But normally dissociation comes by way of trying to give distance between our system and any pain that might arise in connection. So in some sense, developmentally, this association, getting some distance from people, is the highest that we could have done because the interface with other people was just very painful, whether because parents did not treat us well, or maybe we were violent, or other kids where we were growing up were very mean. Sort of a strategy. Some people will dissociate, some people will be overly aggressive and go towards other people's systems. When we can find connection from a very balanced place where we're feeling both ourselves and the people that we come into contact with, the signal that we're getting both from ourselves and from them, right? The type that gets a little lost if we're dissociating or if we're aggressive or any other of those somewhat skewed strategies, we cannot use the signal to integrate all of the information of the moment and create a non-zero sum solution, a loving solution for everyone that's involved. Right. And so I'm sort of speaking from the assumption here that everyone knows what a non-zero sum solution is and how in the long term it's a more effective one for everyone involved, right? It's only for the person who's creating them. If I have that assumption wrong, please let me know. I hope that's not the case. I hope you have a good sense of it. So returning to this, it's natural. It's like the each organism, each entity, from the very simple desire to take care of themselves, to continue on their life path, to survive and thrive, will naturally trend towards gratitude, towards love, towards non-zero sum solutions, unless the conditions of their lives and the existing genes that they're wearing are so tight and so skewed in how they uh, shape their perception and shape their action to continue on a vicious cycle. There's a way that a deep enough understanding of this, the one that necessarily comes with the intellectual understanding and the actual, let's say, somatic or baked in understanding coming in through gratitude practice, makes all the claims by Buddhists make a lot more sense. If only we all meditated together. If only we could have this technology going into emptiness, letting go of all of the past ideas of what was wrong and how things should have been and what you did, all the anger that we're carrying, all of those motifs that in some sense are along that spectrum of dissociating, like I'm here and you're something very different, or aggressive, like if I'm not killing you, I will not feel safe. To let this go and mid in the middle, so to speak, allow freshly arising fundamental consciousness to direct the engagement between us, which is going to continue proliferating and staying inside of the vicious cycle of violence and blame and trauma and the creation of more and more pain. Any
J-
comments on
Just
that?
to just to say something to Almog, yet at the same time, I mean, your question is very, very valid. The fact is that we are all challenged by that it's not easy. It's hard because we are in that body and we are survival nature and we want to live and we are thinking about ourselves. So we have all this natural, call it whatever natural, not natural, built of samskara or whatever it is that we are challenged by that, and we are here to get to that point. But I don't think it's easy because there are other subsystems that are very, very self-centered that are making it hard. And to get to the point of working with others that, again, other people and within us that greedy, wants money, sex, fame, which are part of us, it's hard to deal with. It's hard to really create harmony with.
Yeah, I do notice that there is a lack of difference between uh, and empathy towards myself, empathy towards other, empathy toward not a person, say like an organization of a thing. Um, yeah, it's all basically the same. And I know through my practice that working for empathy towards myself just naturally produce uh, this openness and accepting and non-aggressiveness. So yeah, that makes sense.
Ultimately, the
I
way
have
that
a,
we treat ourselves is how we treat others, which is why this type of work, even as we learn to come into terms with all of the parts of us, helps us relate to others with the same loving gratitude, with the same kindness, the same compassion. Someone's, yeah.
yeah, I have a question. Is there such a thing as a right boundary, or like a right pushback, coming from a compassionate stance?
What do you think?
I think so, yeah. I think it's going just to the point where um, balance can reestablish itself, but not any further. So no retribution, just protection. But I think that point is sometimes hard to find.
Yeah. And that as well is enhanced by our capacity to feel ourselves, to be tuned to the other person, and then really enact the boundary in a way that doesn't push the person away too much or is aggressive towards them, or that doesn't take our needs into account and leaves them a space to penetrate us in a way that we're not interested in. So there's no, it's not so much that there's a right way, right? When people say right, my mind goes into some like ultimate answer that's always correct. Like what's right for this moment, this moment, this moment.
Is it that there's conflicts between like survival and more the compassion and love and working together, or is it that there was just a misunderstanding at some point of like um, what actually helps us survive, and then that just got perpetuated? Is it like good system and like actually everything can fall under that, or are there competing things and that's why there's different poles that keep getting perpetuated?
Yeah, so suddenly at the beginning of this path, we have many competing, pushing and pulling interests, very many different strategies, all fighting for supremacy in a more aggressive zero-sum way. Again, this is what's reflected in the Buddhist thinking of defilements or taints as asavas and kleshas that are at the root or the beginning of the 12 links of dependent origination, what's otherwise known as the wheel of samsara. And anytime we start with a lack of recognition of fundamental consciousness, like we have some existing mental structure that we perceive reality from, and it has baked inside of it a taint, a defilement in this way, it's going to relate to any other mental structure in a way that's a little more pushy, intense, fighting, versus going towards the more collaborative end. Now, ultimately, the place we want to go to is one where it's not even about harmony between different parts. It's not that we have, the part that knows how to milk the cow and the part that knows how to plant seeds, and they're like, okay, I don't have energy for both today. So what am I going to do first, right? So they try to convince you, oh, but if you don't have milk, you blah, blah, blah. But if you don't plant the seed, then tomorrow you won't have food, right? Like this whole. It's a way that those relax completely, or more and more completely as we go down this path. And then the coordination act that arises in the moment, while still having instilled in it all of the wisdom that already exists in the mind, a harmony that comes from the system being completely undifferentiated, such that all of the needs come together into a structure that most respects the totality of the weighting that from this pre existing wisdom is the best for you, is the expression of your highest wisdom. And that's not to say, I know I said it in a bit of a complicated way. Let me try to simplify this. It's like imagine that you're waking up in the morning from a very deep sleep. The first urge that comes up, the first thought that comes up, the first coordinator to sort of wake up and drive you is not competing with anything else. Right? Like you may wake up in the morning and you're just like, oh, I'm gonna go pee now. Right? Or you have like excitement about something that's gonna happen that day. Right? So this is not a perfect analogy because even during sleep, the issue with being what we call a sentient being in an ordinary mind, those things never fully rest. There's like ongoing competition and background operation, even during sleep. But more and more we trend towards a place where everything is very silent. And the thing that happens from you, the act of coordination happening from you, doesn't have to compete with other petrified acts. It just takes up reality in a way that's much closer to those fundamental bits of contact and moves through you as the energy of the universe towards fulfilling whatever need or stemming desire is most relevant from the moment, is most respectful of all of that, all of what you are.
That makes sense. Oh, and I was wondering kind of the survival versus and kind of like as an organism or like as a biological organism. Like,
Mhm.
did we just misunderstand what actually helps us survive, and therefore we try to do all this zero something, or is there a legit like conflict there, and that's why we ended up in this weird place?
Well, it's both, right? If you have a conflict, it's always a legit conflict. Um, if there's conflict, there are multiple perspectives that have not been able to find the commonalities between them, the way that they come together, or maybe even if they have, there's just not enough resources to fuel both of the perspectives. thing is, a lack of resources to support multiple perspectives is what ultimately creates the friction between them that can then refine them into a more holistic perspective. And it ultimately, through this path, helps them relax altogether, trusting that at the right time they can arise, use the relevant perspective, and then meet the need, do the thing that's required. So often the conflict is happening, and maybe this is more what you mean by like non-legit or illegitimate conflict, is a conflict that only exists because the warring perspectives are attached, they're grasping the system, right? And if you completely let them go, the thing that arises is a unification of those perspectives, or what I mentioned before in terms of collecting all of the signal that exists and all of the wisdom that the system has to offer into a unified perspective that also comes up, provides its service, and then dissolves. Does that make sense? Does it answer the question?
I think so. I think maybe I was thinking about it more from like trying to understand it from like an evolutionary perspective. Like, was it just? But I think that answers. I think your question answers that. Like, at some point, resources were a real thing, and it was going to be, you know, one person survived versus the other,
Mm-hmm.
kind of carried on. But nowadays, maybe sometimes it's more the clinging to it from that,
Yeah.
down stuff from when there were. Not that saying there's no resource issue, but less so than before.
Maybe it would be good to provide some practical example or something like this rather than. But let's say you are with someone, and let's say you are loving and caring, and somebody wants to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, something very extreme even. Yes, or you fight for the bread or whatever it is, and one is more self-centered and the other one is not. Then what do you do? An example. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what's
Where is, and maybe that goes to say, question, where is the line? Yes, and how do you can provide some kind of a protect yourself, guard yourself? What exactly the factors that you engage
mm-hmm.
in this situation? I don't know. That's maybe something for a discussion.
So again, I like to think about this in a similar way, which is only the person loving as they may be, needing to defend themselves in the moment, know where the line is or know what type of activity both respects their own being in terms of defending themselves and minimizes harm, or in some sense loves even the assailant. How can we incapacitate our attacker? How can we defend ourselves in a way that doesn't reflect an anger or hate or othering that we have towards that person? And at the beginning, we can have an idea of, oh, okay, let me shoot his leg or whatever. Of course, that doesn't necessarily also that's not necessarily always possible. If I'm a trained marksman, sure, maybe I can. If I'm holding a gun shakily, trying to aim at the leg might be a way that I'm not respecting myself in the moment. I'm not taking care of myself. So it depends on the person. It depends on the coordinators and what sort of skills they have. It depends on the perspective. Is the person really trying to come and kill me, or is it just threatening? If they're coming to kill me, I'm aiming to center mass. I'm aiming in a way that might kill them. If I think they're just waving their hands, maybe I fire to the sky just to warn them. There's always like infinite amount of considerations coming in, and only you in the moment can decide from the wisdom that you have available to you how to best play it out. We like to pretend that from an external perspective we can judge and criticize, but you're never there in the moment.
And is that figuring that out, is that a thing that for folks who are really far along, like they don't require the kind of thinking mind or the like they don't
Yeah.
require weighing things out to make it's something that is automatically known.
There's less and less thinking.
Mhm.
There's a way that um, thinking is a way. Actually, this leads us to the next thing that I wanted to mention. Thinking is a way for parts, for coordinators that live in an environment where they think they're separate from other parts, or let's say the communication and collaboration technology existing in the mind doesn't allow the type of harmony that makes thoughts look like lesser technology, where a bunch of parts sort of coming together. A thought is at worst an act of propaganda, trying to convince the system of something, and at best, a lower bandwidth way of communicating with the other parts of ourselves. And the deeper we go into this path, and the more we can let go of all parts and just allow acts of coordination to come up in the moment, the more thoughts are not needed, or the more the thought can be like very wispy. It can even be, I'm imagining in a situation like defending ourselves, it can even be like, oh no, I have to kill someone, right? It's just like the thing that comes up and informs the system versus, oh, what to do? Can I shoot? Can I work? It's like, oh, it's like one motion, right? And even the, oh no, I have to shoot someone ultimately is an expression of a type of gross karma that might even be exhausted with that thought coming up, sort of jumping ahead into deeper down in the path. So I'll say, just to offer a friendly warning, do not try to push away thoughts. Right? If thoughts are to be extinguished, it's through allowing, accepting, even giving gratitude through the practice that we're discussing. And ultimately, the place where we're going towards is not creating harmony between different parts, or it's more so to create enough harmony between the different parts so that they can start unwinding the grab. They can start unwinding the types of conflicts that we were calling illegitimate conflicts, right? The conflicts that don't exist if the different governments, right, the different tentacled organizations are not there. And go more and more towards a space where the parts that are still online are much more refined, and towards an end where they're very loosely held and even not online at all, besides really the fundamental functioning of our senses and like all of the physiological processes leading to homeostasis, right? Like pumping the blood and breathing. And then things are rising just in time to meet reality as it is with our highest wisdom. The putting it all together chapter later down this part of the book has the whole progression, starting from concentration and then emptiness practices, and then I think sort of letting go and just rising just in time. Now I'm meeting reality this way. Now I'm wearing these jeans. Now I'm doing this. Um, and this also corresponds, using the opportunity to call out the practice book. In the beginning, I speak about the two phases of practice. One is the development stage, and the other is completion stage. In the development stage, we create this harmony in the system that then allows us, or let me also speak the thrust language. So thrust one in the practice book is creating this inner harmony. Thrust two is agreeing on more fundamental principles of operation. In a sense, it's identifying the less differentiated parts of the constructs of mind. In the context of what we were speaking about last time, it's identifying just the contacts, or things that are less and less enveloped. We use this analogy of getting to a place where what we see, or what's available for us to construct mental constructs and create these acts of coordination, is a Tetris game where we continuously only get a single square versus all the annoying shapes that you have to fit in, right? And if we only get the single squares, we don't have in the Tetris analogy, we don't have the empty spaces, right? That are that we have to solve in the Tetris game. All the system comes together in a much more fine way. There's no useless spaces. There's no space. The spaces in this sense create, or like are analogous to the friction between the different parts. The component pieces, if the Lego pieces of mind that we can use are fundamental conscious contacts, right? We can create something that doesn't lead to conflict. It's automatically grateful. It's automatically loving. So second thrust is about emptiness practices, letting go of the genes. The next thrust is about identifying much more immediately in experience those fundamental bits. And then the next thrust is what we would call completion practice. From this perspective of an harmonious mind that has in it more and more baked assumptions of gratitude, and even this being dissolved when it's not active, what happens is every part of us that's holding pain and karma, everything that has not, let me say this differently. Every experience that we've had that's left an imprint on us that we were not able to process at the time because of pre-existing conflict, because we were babies and our minds did not have a large enough space of awareness. Any movement of coordination that just could not be contained by the system, that could not be welcomed by the system, sort of stuck in the depth, in the basements of our minds. And these are this karma or trauma is the initial warped shape that then more and more structures, more and more layers of clothing get built up and worn on top of, and that's what leads to the vicious cycles. If I have some pain that I've experienced as a child that I've not discharged, that has not been felt from a loving perspective, that pain, some of that pain signal will be infused and envelop every new information coming into the system. So then in the completion stage, after we've developed this mind to a state of harmony and agreeing on coming into contact with fundamental consciousness, with this more refined and small bits of contact with reality, the energy that comes through fundamental consciousness starts poking at everything that's ever been paining us and that we have not metabolized. That's the path of karmic exhaustion. It's the path of completion, bringing to completion every act of coordination that our system could not abide, that our system could not entertain and allow. And so all of those tensions locked in the body, all of those pains, we can start feeling burn up in us. Any place that's tense in the body can have like and with it all of the images, all of the memories, all of the assumptions that were created based on those. It's like the equivalent of our superhero origin story. You know, if I was bit by a radioactive spider, right? Maybe I'll have an identity as a Spider-Man, right? This is sort of like the myth making of such a thing. But you know, if as a child I was invalidated by my peers, maybe I'll take some distance. Maybe I'm sort of rejecting reality, rejecting other people, so that I don't feel the rejection. Rejecting before I will be rejected even more. Or if someone was aggressive towards me and I learned that I can make them stop being aggressive by going towards them, right? And harming them and being intimidating for them, I will forever hold as the jeans that I'm wearing, it's like I'm always holding a knife. You know, maybe my face is a little more like kind of aggressive in this way, right? This is something calm and relaxed. And this karma coming from the types of experiences, the things that are baked inside of us, that is continuously affecting perception, is also affecting it in a way that creates behavior that maintains this karma. that perpetuates this vicious cycle. This is what we call samsara. Samsara is the proliferation and continuation of the vicious cycle, starting from incomplete movements in our bodies and minds, incomplete coordination acts. Coordination acts that were met with invalidation versus with love, versus with gratitude and recognition. It brings me back to the way that fundamental consciousness, like the most essential nature of our world, is love, is gratitude. Because ultimately, that's the only thing that's robust enough to maintain this whole universe. Anything that's not that, whether through the skillful practice that we're doing, through the developmental stage and the completion stage, or just through the natural development of our universe, will be exhausted. So we're doing something that naturally happens, but as agents of nature, using wisdom that others have inherited us, we can accelerate the process. We can ride the waves of karma more skillfully, so that we don't continually crash into the ocean of a nice and smooth experience of life. Ultimately, through the completion stage, what happens is we clear all of this karma, we let go of all of the baggage. And that is what allows us to fully exist without parts that are continually grabbing. Because in this sense, the grab is only is only guarding against coming into contact with pain that we could not have metabolized before. And when the pain is over, just relax and be a direct and continuous flow of fundamental consciousness.
So, what is the name of that model or framework of the three stages that you described?
What is what is the model? So a model that I really like is the Mahamudra model, which has ground, path, and fruition. And and in the Heart Illuminated practice book, I use a model with 5 thrusts that, in a sense, are inserting some more granularity into the 3 stage map and just making it a 5-stage map. And I speak about the mapping in the book, what corresponds to what.
I have a question about the thought that we were discussing before. And what interests me is, where do the thought originate? Whether in the sub-minds that are discussing or fighting, or is there a sub-mind that generates the thoughts that explains the whole thing?
What's the difference?
Uh, the difference is that the sub-minds do their own thing, and then someone tells the stories to
Oh,
another sub-mind tells
I
the
see what you
story
I
about
see
what
what.
happened.
Yeah, it's both. There can be, so for example, if you're hungry and you're reaching for ice cream, maybe that's just a very simple act. It's like, oh, sweet, right? And then there can be another sub-mind that tells the story, oh, I'm so fat, I can't help myself, I keep eating, right? And that's a way for the narrating sub-mind to take some of the energy of that movement. Like it's making it about it, right? The narrator sub-mind. But there can be, you could speak about the coordination act or the meta coordination act. That's the whole self, and that is partially puppeteering the narrator, like the Ministry of Propaganda, right? And using it to divert energy to the great self structure. So it's both. It's both, and I'll say it depends on what perspective you want to take. So another very useful paradigm that I want to explore in the context of everything we've described today is that of trauma and how it relates to gratitude. So trauma can only be created if there's so much energy moving through the system, and it can be pain, but it can also be excitement. It can be just something that feels overwhelming. It's too big for the system to contain. There's so much that's happening. And then there's a schism, or my friend Pele likes saying a shattering, which is also the way that Kabbalah relates to this notion, a shattering of the vessel of the body mind. So there becomes a schism or a split because the mind is trying to get some distance between it and the energy flow. And the flavor of the energy flow is what we will then create a structure of mind that is polarized from. Right? So if you consider the silly Spider-Man example, if I'm bit by a spider, never mind the radioactive spider, if I'm bit by a spider, maybe I will have an identity of someone that's either super interested in spiders or that wants to kill all the spiders in the world, and everything that looks a little bit like a spider is bad, and anything that has features of a spider is like. Do you get what I'm saying? Maybe we can find a less silly example, right? Like if oh yeah, please.
I mean, you have a spider-shaped hole in your being then, and whatever you do, like, isn't a spider, but like everything kind of wraps around the spider and tries to contain it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's use a slightly less silly example. Like if my house burned down in a fire when I was 4, I uh, I will either become a firefighter, so that no one ever has to feel the danger of fires again, or I will be so terrified of fire that I'll have a hard time even starting the stove at home. Right? It's not 100% either way, but this is at the foundation of our identity. Something happened that was too much for us to entertain, and the way that we paved over it, or created distance from it, is the seed of our identity. Whether we are now aversive to the thing or we crave something that sort of looks like it in the world, whether I'm polarized away or towards, whether it's push or pull. And then that also determines whether the thing is pleasant or unpleasant. Because pleasant or unpleasant necessarily depend on the perspective that we're taking. And the perspective that we're taking necessarily arises from the existing genes that we're wearing. The existing coordination act that's continually governing how we perceive the world in each and every moment. And the more a coordination act, right, and every genes is a coordination act that's continually dancing, that's continually making its coordinating movement in some sense, right? It's sort of like a petrified, right? It's the same melody being played, but like in zombie form, determines both what tools are available to us, right? If I'm a firefighter, if I have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I'm sure you all are familiar with that idiom. And if I can't let go of the hammer, if my hand always does this, I can't pick up another tool. And so, what we know about trauma, and this is, I wish we had a little more time today to speak about this. Maybe I'll mention it in a bookmark. Okay, let's see what justice we can do this. What we know from essentially all of the wisdom traditions of the world, and especially the types of cultures that still have these types of rituals, is that initiation, meaning a process where I, as a child, prove myself and become a man, something that's touched me really deeply, that was challenging, that I had to deal with in the world, it has the same makings of trauma with two major differences. Initiation is something that I choose, where trauma is something that was done to me. And initiation is something that I'm happy has happened, that I have a gratitude for the way it has affected me, that I'm happy with how it's now shaped me to be, versus trauma is a state that I'm still continually averse to, and I'm trying to go back to the way things were. Meaning I'm invalidating the experience, I'm invalidating the way that I am now. And so in the same way, we use the example of a house burning down, but like maybe the typical thing is a teenager going into the forest to slay a lion or to get a hair from the nose of a tiger, bringing it back. And of course, the child can be hurt, it can have scars for life. But when he comes back with the head of the lion, everyone treats him as a man, and he forever will regale in the story of the bravery. Now he has everything that's changed through the battle, through this exercise that he's been through. Or someone can get lost in the forest and get bit by a lion, and they come out and they're forever a victim. So in the same way, we can relate to trauma, even if something has happened to us that has left a traumatic mark, right? Even if now, and we're all humans, we all have these types of experiences that we still have a preference for not having had happen. But we can still, in retrospect, reclaim and choose to change the perspective, adopt a skillful perspective where we see how we choose now to be the person, to be the entity, to be the identity that chose this. And the way to do this is through gratitude. So we can have gratitude for the way that we are now, that we would never have been unless our house burned down, or unless we were assaulted, or unless the lion tore a part of our face. Right? And of course it's easy to see how the person who's now a firefighter can have gratitude for what they can do, for the service they can provide. And the person who was assaulted maybe now is a martial arts master, or the person who was neglected as a child is now supremely self-reliant, so on and so forth. And giving gratitude to this act of coordination, or all of the coordinators coming together to enact the being that we are, is what allows this, in some sense, reclamation or retroactive choice. And truly, ultimately, as we go down this path, we can also see how circumstances that were created in what, from the earlier perspective, could be seen as something we did not choose, were, in a way, the instantiation of the karma that at the time we did not know already existed in us. Meaning maybe I wandered into the forest because I wanted to be disassociated from people. And I got bit by a spider because I was previously rewarded for taking risks. And my identity that was already there was taking risks. Or even if jumping into a greater system, the conditions and causes that organize themselves into me going through a traumatic experience was the karma, not even of mine, but of the greater field of beings that exist in. This can be what can be called intergenerational trauma or cultural trauma. And we can become so big so that we even choose to identify or lose the identification we have that prevents us from taking ownership of this whole realm of existence. We become so big that even the karma that existed previous to when we were born, or the karma that was inflicted on us, we're now seeing as part of the greater choice of this greater movement of the entire universe that is not distinct from us. So, taking this path of gratitude all the way down, reclaiming every aspect of us, including what we think is bad, including what we think we did not choose, ultimately is the path to awakening and a growth beyond the limitations of even our personal self. And the more and more complete merging with the entirety of what is, which is what we call enlightenment.
A question that it's always intrigued me, kind of like, and I think this is a beautiful discussion about trauma and gratitude and healing and so on and so forth. But I wonder if gratitude could be established if you are in a survival mode. Because for the people that, I met some people that has trauma, and, I can tell you until tomorrow, have gratitude, have self-compassion. I said, what the fuck are you talking about? I mean, do you know what they've done that to me? And that victim mentality and what they faced. And so I wonder, obviously it's a process and we talk about that, but you don't have that self-awareness, self-compassion, kindness, gentleness, and build it so gradually. You feel the trauma that it's so hard in your soul. Yeah, and we are very lucky here right now, all of us, to sit, and talks about philosophy and beautiful things. I mean, who talks about samsara or karma or whatever it is? I mean, in any case, I mean, so going back to that question, I mean, because most people that are really having in this traumatic, that to them, and if they are in this survival mode, are they able to have that sense of gratitude?
You're absolutely right. And before going deeper, I will say a lot of the gratitude that I have, and I invite you also to allow and to generate in you, is a gratitude for having the right circumstances, causes and conditions, allowing us to have this practice. And not only that, but also the teachings that are available to us that tell us how to go down this path. Many people don't have the safety, and many people who have the safety don't have the teachings. So a really great a really great meditation can be with this attitude of gratitude towards the precious teachings being available. There are whole Tibetan Buddhist discourses around the unlikelihood of being born as a human in a time where the teachings are available and being exposed to them. It's like there's a metaphor of a turtle coming to the surface of the water in an ocean and hitting like a circle of straw, right? Like imagine there's one of them in the entirety of the oceans on Earth, and there's one turtle, and it can spend eons just in the course of its life, and then one time maybe it can. Yeah, all sorts of funny metaphors like that. So it is a great meditation. Um, so when you run out of no, that's a stupid joke. I'm gonna let it go. Um, the other thing I wanted to say, which is important, is even in survival mode, even when everything is horrible, even a tiny thought, a tiny intention of gratitude can make all the difference. One of the suttas describes the Buddha in a time in a previous life when he was in hell. he went to hell because he was upset with his mother, and he was physically violent with her, eventually throwing her on the floor and then stomping in her head till she died. So his next life was in hell, and his hell was eons of feeling like his head was crushed. And he knew throughout this time that he was surrounded by other beings going through torture, through similar types of very uncomfortable and unpleasant circumstances. And so for eons, he had just like the woe is me, I'm a victim, everything is terrible. Why do I deserve this? This is so horrible. And one time, he looked at another person in hell and had a thought of compassion. He wished him well, he wished for his torture to stop. And in that moment, he was reincarnated in a slightly nicer hell realm. Which tells us one tiny intention of compassion or of gratitude can change the whole game. And what we're trying to do is create a continuous, self sustaining, virtuous cycle of love, of gratitude, of compassion. Okay, so before we go, I really want us to do an exercise on this, like to really bring it home. Do we have another 15 minutes to be here? Completely respective if some of you need to go.
Yeah,
But
I'm sorry, but I have to leave. But thank you. See you next week.
Actually, same. A
okay.
bit in a hurry.
So before you go, before we do the exercise, I just want you to, even in 2 minutes, the simpler exercise is to find gratitude for even things that are bad in your life. What is an example of something even horrible happening? And how can you see the goodness that comes out of it? If anyone has an example, I'd love to hear it.
Um, I, well, I'm just moving an apartment, which is very stressful because we had like zero notice that we actually need to move. But we kind of switched it very quickly to excitement and being energized of the new opportunities and the what adventure awaits. That's yeah, that's a good example, I think, from
Beautiful.
yesterday.
Beautiful. Yeah. If you have to jump off, please do. If anyone else has an example, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, recently, well, not recently, I lost this chain, which was very valuable to me because it was given to me by my father. And I only realized that I lost it like a year later because I was very busy and thinking about other things. And so I was terribly heartbroken about that. But the search for it caused me to reach out to all the people I've met in that year and basically to talk to a lot of my friends who I wouldn't have talked to otherwise, which was very nice.
So the more we can orient to what we appreciate about an experience, to what we're grateful, the less space there is for all the "oh, woe is me" type of thing that happens. And the more we can arouse energy to help us navigate even the challenging circumstances. The thing that I wanted us to do, but I suppose it's a little late now, so I'm going to leave this as homework for everyone, is in your meditation, or even just reclining on something comfortable, um, and it works best if you've already done some of the meditation, meaning the mind is a little more connected and harmonious, and you're a little more relaxed. Try to bring up, and don't take the worst one that you have. Bring up a traumatic experience, something that's a little stuck in mind, something that you have an idea of, oh, I really wish this has not happened. This was such a horrible thing. I wish I could go back to the way things were before. And choose to see it as something that has given you benefit, that you can be grateful for in terms of the emerging circumstances, how you became, what you learned, what you've gained. And I invite you to do it not in a way that pushes against the other interpretation, certainly not that pushes against the pain, but that reframes the experience and even the pain as being in service to something greater that you now are. Pain in connection is service. Pain in the context of something that you're grateful for is much easier to contain and is what's required for that pain to move through and exhaust. This is the way to heal trauma. This is the way to exhaust karma. And it's a way to live a much more enjoyable life full of gratitude. Hope you each have a chance to do that. Wanted us to do it in break rooms, but lovely. Any other questions and comments before we end? Great. So I'll just say the next time we're going to speak about mental yoga, which is the essence of how we wear jeans skillfully in the process of creating harmony in the mind. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.